If you've ever hired someone off the internet for a job you didn't check twice on, I need you to listen to this before you ever do it again. This happened in my backyard on my son's 7th birthday. I run a small accounting business out of my house in Ohio. Nothing exciting. Spreadsheets, tax season, the occasional client who forgets to send receipts. My wife Dana handles most of the social stuff, birthdays, holidays, all of it. So when our son Eli turned 7, she wanted to do something special. A backyard party, bounce house, cake, the whole thing. And because Eli was obsessed with clowns that year, I mean obsessed, he'd watch clown videos on repeat. She found one online. A local guy. Cheap rate, decent reviews, available on short notice. She booked him through a classified site, paid half up front through an app, and that was that. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't worried, not even a little. This is the part that still gets me looking back, how normal it all felt right up until it wasn't. The guy showed up on time. Full costume already on, which struck me as a little odd because most performers change once they get there, but I figured maybe he lived close by. Bright orange wig, white face paint, red nose, the classic look. Introduced himself as Squiggles. Shook my hand. Firm grip, polite, a little quiet, but plenty of people are quiet before they perform. I paid him the rest in cash. He thanked me, and he went straight to work with the kids. For the first hour, everything was perfect. Balloon animals, magic tricks, the kids screaming with laughter. Eli was glued to him the entire time. Dana kept snapping pictures. Normal Saturday, normal party. It was around the 2-hour mark that things started feeling off, and I want you to understand, nothing dramatic happened yet. It was small things. He stopped doing the big performance voice. His jokes got shorter, flatter, like he was reciting them instead of playing them. A couple of times I caught him staring at nothing, not at the kids, not at us, just staring past the fence into the neighbor's yard for a few seconds too long before snapping back into character. I told myself he was probably just tired. Performers work multiple parties on a Saturday. I didn't think about it again until the cake. We were cutting the cake, everyone gathered around the table, and I noticed he wasn't with the group anymore. I scanned the yard and found him standing near the side gate, the one that leads out to the driveway, just standing there, not doing anything, not talking to anyone, facing the gate like he was waiting for something or someone. I walked over, casual, asked if everything was okay. He turned to me, and this is the detail I can't shake, his smile hadn't moved. Not once. The painted smile obviously doesn't move, that's the whole point of face paint, but his real expression underneath it hadn't shifted either. Same blank, pleasant look he'd had all day, even standing alone at a gate for no reason. He said he was just checking that his van was locked. Fine. Reasonable. I went back to the party. 20 minutes later, Dana came to find me in the kitchen, and her face told me something was wrong before she said a word. She said Eli had gone up to him during a quiet moment and asked if he could come to his next birthday too. And the clown had leaned down, gotten right up close to his face and said, "I already know where you live, buddy. I'll be back before then." Dana laughed it off in the moment because kids don't always report tone correctly, and it could have been a joke. Performers say weird stuff to be funny with kids all the time, but Eli didn't laugh when he told her. He looked confused, a little scared, and when she asked the clown about it directly, he just smiled again, that same flat smile, and said he was only playing around. I went outside to keep an eye on things after that. Watched him for the rest of the party without him knowing I was watching. He performed fine. Balloon animals, more magic, high fives. But every 15 minutes or so, like clockwork, he'd glance toward our house. Not the kids, not the yard, the house itself. Specifically the back door and the windows on the 2nd floor where Eli's bedroom is. When the party ended, he packed up quickly. Faster than I expected. Didn't linger to chat like most vendors do, didn't ask for a tip, didn't ask us to leave a review, which every single person in that business asks for. just loaded his bag into a plain white van parked at the curb, no logo, no business name on the side, nothing, and drove off. That night after Eli went to bed, I couldn't shake it. I pulled up the classifieds listing Dana had used to book him. The profile was gone, completely deleted. No trace of it, no messages we could reference, nothing but the payment confirmation in the app, which just listed a first name and a phone number. I called the number, disconnected. I told myself I was overreacting. Performers are weird. Kids misquote things. People delete old listings all the time. I almost let it go completely. Then 4 days later, I was walking out to grab the mail around 7 a.m., and there was a photograph tucked under our doormat. Not mailed, not left in the box, physically placed under the mat, meaning someone had walked up to our front door sometime in the night. It was a picture of our backyard, taken from the party. You could see Eli in the bounce house, laughing mid-jump. On the back, written in marker, were 4 words. "See you next year." We called the police that day. They took a report, said they'd look into it, said without a name or a working number there wasn't much to go on. No cameras caught the van clearly enough to get a plate. The classified site had no record of the account by the time they checked either. We changed our locks within the week, installed cameras. Dana still won't book anyone for parties she hasn't met in person first, and honestly, neither will I. Eli doesn't ask about clowns anymore. He doesn't really talk about that day at all, actually, and we've learned not to bring it up. It's been almost a year now. No van, no photos, no calls. Maybe it really was just some guy trying to scare us for a laugh, the kind of sick joke some people think is funny. I want to believe that. Most days I do. But Eli's birthday is coming up again in 3 weeks. And every night this month, I've caught myself walking past his window before bed, just to check that it's locked. If you have ever worked a job you hated for money you needed, you are going to understand exactly how I ended up locked inside a rented storage unit in Ohio, screaming into a costume I could not take off. I was 24, broke, and one missed rent payment away from moving back in with my parents. So when a guy named Denny posted in a local gig group looking for, quote, reliable people for weekend entertainment work, no experience needed, cash paid same day, I didn't ask a lot of questions. I should have. The job was simple on paper. Kids' birthday parties, grand openings for small businesses, the occasional haunted trail in October. I would put on a clown costume, do a scripted little bit, hand out candy, take pictures, and go home with $60 to $100 depending on the gig. Denny ran the whole operation out of a storage facility off Route 30, just outside a town so small it didn't have a stoplight. He kept the costumes there. Racks of them, foam noses, wigs in plastic bins, a whole wall of masks that all had that same painted, frozen smile. The first few weeks were fine. Boring, even. I'd show up, Denny would hand me a costume bag, I'd change in a bathroom at whatever venue we were working, do the gig, come back, return the costume, get paid. He was strict about the costumes never leaving the unit overnight. Said it was a liability thing, insurance, whatever. I didn't care. I needed the money. The gig that changed everything was a birthday party in a town called Millfield. Small house, maybe 15 kids, a backyard with a bounce house already losing air. Denny wasn't feeling well that day, so for the first time he gave me the key to the storage unit and told me to grab a costume myself and lock up after. I went to the unit. There were rows of clown costumes hanging perfectly still, and at the far end, one bin that was closed with a padlock, separate from all the others. Every other bin in that place was open, unlocked, easy access. Just that one wasn't. I remember thinking that was strange, and then I remember telling myself it wasn't my business, grabbing a costume bag off the nearest rack and getting out of there. The party itself started fine. I did my balloon animals, my juggling bit, The kids laughed at my terrible jokes. But about 20 minutes in, a woman, the birthday girl's aunt I think, pulled her sister aside and I heard just enough to feel my stomach drop. She said that's not the same costume as last year. Last year's guy had blue around the eyes. This one's wrong. I didn't think much of it in the moment. Costumes get swapped, right? But she kept staring at me the rest of the party, not scared exactly, confused, like she was trying to solve a puzzle and not liking the answer she was landing on. When I got back to the storage unit that night to return the costume, Denny still hadn't shown up, and his phone went straight to voicemail. I let myself in with the key he'd given me, and that's when I actually looked at what I'd been wearing all day. Under the fluorescent light, checking the tag inside the collar out of pure boredom, I found a strip of masking tape with a name written on it in faded marker. Not Denny's name, not a business name, just a first name, a last name, and under it, in smaller letters, a set of numbers that took me a second to realize was a date. An old date, almost 11 years old. I want to be honest with you. At that point I still wasn't scared, just annoyed and tired and ready to go home. I hung the costume back on its rack, and on my way out I nudged that locked bin at the end of the row with my knee. The padlock, old and rusted, just gave. It wasn't actually latched. I know I shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity is a thing when you're alone in a storage unit at 10 at night, and you've just learned the costume you wore around 15 children had another man's name sewn inside it. Inside that bin were newspaper clippings, folded, yellowed, held together with a rubber band that snapped the second I touched it. They were local stories, going back over a decade, about a man who used to run children's parties in 3 different counties under different business names, different clown names too, and how, 11 years ago, he'd been arrested after a parent found something in his van that had nothing to do with balloon animals. The clippings didn't say what. They didn't need to. I understood. I heard the unit's rolling door start to come down. I hadn't touched it. I was 15 feet from the entrance, and the door was moving on its own, grinding down that track slow and mechanical, and the motor sound filled that concrete room in a way that made my ears ring. I ran for it, actually ran, and I got my hand under the edge just as it reached my knees, and I forced it back up hard enough that something in my shoulder still aches on cold mornings. Outside in the gravel lot, a car was pulling away. No headlights, just taillights, red and small, getting smaller down the access road until they turned onto the highway and were gone. I never saw Denny again. Not once. His number disconnected within the week. The storage unit was cleared out entirely by the following weekend. Every costume, every bin, gone like none of it had ever been there. And the office at the front of the facility told me the unit had been rented under a name that wasn't Denny either. I called the local police department about what I'd found. They took a report. A detective actually called me back a month later, and he was polite, professional, and told me that the man in those newspaper clippings had been released 2 years earlier after serving his sentence, and that as far as they knew, he was living somewhere in another state entirely. Case closed, nothing they could do with what little I had. But here's the part I think about at 3 in the morning more than anything else. When I described the costume I'd worn that day, the one with the tag and the old man's name inside it, the detective went quiet for a second. Then he told me the man in those articles had a nickname the local kids used to call him, one that showed up in almost every clipping. And it matched, almost word for word, the description that Aunt at the birthday party had given about the costume from the year before. Blue around the eyes. I don't do parties anymore. I don't do any gig I find through a group chat, any job where I don't know exactly who's signing my check. For a long time I told myself it was a coincidence, that faded ink on old masking tape doesn't prove anything. I still believe that some days, usually in daylight. It's the nights that are harder. Because there's one detail I never told the detective, one thing I left out of the report because I didn't know how to explain it. When I got home that night, I unzipped the costume bag to hang it up one last time before bed. Folded inside the collar, tucked under that strip of tape with the old man's name on it, was a second piece of tape. Fresh. Not faded at all. New ink, still slightly tacky if you pressed a thumb to it. It had my name on it. I never told Denny my last name. I never wrote it down anywhere in that storage unit. I never gave it to anyone connected to that job except through a phone number and a first name in a group chat message. But there it was, spelled correctly in the same handwriting as the other tag, sitting against my skin the entire time I was smiling at 15 children in someone's backyard. So if you've ever taken quick cash work from someone you never really looked in the eye, someone who handed you a costume, a script, a role to play for a few hours and never once told you who they really were, I'd ask yourself the same question I ask myself most nights before I fall asleep: whose name is on the tag you're wearing right now, and whether somebody somewhere already knows it. If you've ever worked a job where you had to smile at strangers for a living, you need to hear this, because I used to be one of those strangers. And one night, the smiling almost got me killed. I was 28, broke, and answering ads on a gig app for entertainment work, cash paid same day. I'd done face painting at county fairs before, so when I saw a listing for a company that supplied performers for corporate events, I figured it was easy money. Someone else handled the bookings, the costumes, the makeup. All I had to do was show up, put on the outfit they gave me, and perform. The company was a small operation, 3 or 4 performers on their roster. I met the owner, a guy named Dale, at a diner off Route 9. He was maybe 50, soft-spoken, wore a company polo. He explained the deal: corporate picnics, grand openings, the occasional private event. I'd be playing a character called Buttons. Red nose, white face, orange wig, the whole classic look. Nothing edgy, nothing scary, family-friendly stuff. For the first 2 months, it was exactly that. I did a hardware store opening in Ohio. I did a company picnic for an insurance firm. Easy gigs, good tips, home by dark. I started to actually enjoy it. There's something strange and kind of nice about making a stranger's kid laugh so hard they can't breathe. I got good at the balloon animals. I got good at the voice. Then in October, Dale called me about a private event out in a town I'd never heard of, about 2 hours from where I lived. He said it paid triple the usual rate, cash, no questions. Said the client was some wealthy family throwing an anniversary party and wanted something classic and fun for the adults, since apparently the couple had met at a carnival decades ago. I remember thinking that was sweet. I remember thinking triple pay for one night was the kind of thing you don't turn down when your rent is due in 4 days. I drove out there on a Saturday evening. The address led me to a property set way back from the road, long gravel driveway, no other houses in sight. I want to be clear, I'm not going to describe the property in some ominous way just because of what happened later. It was a normal, nice house, big lawn, a separate building out back that looked like a converted barn, lights on inside, string lights strung along the porch. Cars were already parked along the driveway when I got there, maybe 15 of them. I got changed in my car like I always did. Full costume, wig, the white base paint, the red smile. When I walked up to the barn and knocked, a woman I didn't recognize answered. Not Dale, not anyone I'd met before. She said the hosts were expecting me, and led me straight through to what she called the showroom. Here's the first thing that felt wrong, and I want you to sit with this feeling because I felt it too and I ignored it. There was no anniversary decor anywhere. No banner, no cake, no photos of the couple. Just folding chairs set up in rows, facing a small stage and maybe 20 people sitting there in total silence, watching me walk in. Nobody was talking. A few of them had phones raised, recording. I did what I was trained to do. I smiled, I waved, I started my bit. Balloon dog for the first row, a couple of jokes, my usual opener, and nobody laughed. Nobody clapped. They just watched me dead silent, phone still rolling. I kept going because I didn't know what else to do. I've thought about that a lot since. Why didn't I just stop? I think part of you, when you're standing in a spotlight in a room full of strangers, your brain refuses to believe something's actually wrong. It tells you to keep performing until the wrongness makes itself undeniable. That happened about 4 minutes in. A man in the front row stood up, still filming, and said, calm as anything, take off the nose. Not asking, telling. And when I hesitated, laughing it off, saying something dumb like, the nose stays on for the whole show, folks, a second person stood up. Then a third. They weren't moving toward me yet. They were spreading out quietly along the side walls, like they were closing off the only path back to the door. I want to tell you my instincts kicked in like some movie hero, but what actually happened is I froze. My hands were still holding a half-inflated balloon. And then the woman who'd led me in leaned toward another guest and said something I actually heard, because the room was that quiet. This one looks close enough. Close enough. Those 2 words did more to me than anything else that night, because I understood all at once that I hadn't been hired to entertain anyone. I'd been hired because I matched a description. I didn't wait to find out what description. I threw the balloon dog at the nearest guy blocking my exit, hard enough that it bought me half a second, and I ran. Not through the front, because that's where most of them were spreading toward. There was a side door near the stage that I'd clocked without even realizing I'd clocked it, some instinct filing it away the second I walked in. I hit it running, and it was, thank God, unlocked. I came out into the dark on the side of the barn. No idea what was on the other end of that property. Just running on gravel in floppy, oversized clown shoes, which, if you've never tried it, is like running in swim fins. I heard shouting behind me, not chasing exactly, more like people calling out directions to each other, coordinating. I cut across the lawn instead of the driveway because the driveway was the obvious route, kicked the shoes off completely, and ran barefoot through wet grass toward the road. My car was still parked out front, keys in my pocket, but I wasn't going anywhere near it. I ran the opposite direction, toward a light I could see maybe a quarter mile down the road. Turned out to be a gas station. The guy behind the counter took one look at a grown man in full clown makeup, sprinting in without shoes, and immediately came around the counter, no questions, and locked the door behind me. I think the sheer wrongness of what he was seeing told him everything he needed to know. I remember sliding down against a display of motor oil and just shaking, unable to get words out for almost a full minute. The police searched the property that night. The barn was empty. Everyone was gone. My car was gone too, towed or driven off, never found. I never learned who they thought I was, or what close enough was supposed to mean, or what would have happened in the next 30 seconds if I hadn't run. The investigation went cold within a month. No arrests, no explanation, just a file somewhere with my statement in it, and a barn that's since been torn down. I don't paint faces anymore. I don't do gigs I found on an app. And if I ever see a listing that pays triple for one night's work with no explanation why, I already know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep scrolling. If you loved these 3, don't leave without hitting that subscribe button. Drop a comment below and tell me which of these 3 stories creeped you out the most. Was it the first, the second, or the third? I read every single comment. And if this video kept you up a little, hit that like button. Stay safe out there and maybe check your locks tonight.